Yes. You can conceive of the Internet almost as a global electronic library without a librarian. There is information in fact, there's a project being sponsored by the United States government called Universal Access. And the access is provided to government information, economic development, health care, information regarding things from jobs to how do I get immunization treatments. What the government is trying to do in the United States is to use the Internet to provide community information services, to place government information online, and of course provide access to the libraries. In fact, if you are on the web and you look at the Library of Congress has a World Wide Web server known as LC Marvel, and if you arrive there, you basically will see a global electronic library, and it's organized very much like a library on topics from psychology and sociology, philosophy, science, and so on. And if you try that, I think you'll be pleasantly surprised as to how much information is organized and categorized in systems like that.
Combining those two questions, one of the challenges facing Internet in the future is to retain the kind of freedom of access and use and flexibility in the face of great increases in numbers and also of commercial application and others. I have no crystal ball, but it's going to be very interesting to watch. We have a call from Panama, the Universidad Tecnológica de Panama. Welcome. Your question, please.
Muy buenos días.
Yes, good morning.
Mi pregunta es,
My question is, are there any statistics regarding the impact on the private sector as regards an information service that is a web page on the Internet? What information does it present?
Okay.
Well, I think the topics that can be presented on web client servers are almost limitless. In the first part of your question, you asked about the private sector. I think one of the surprises, so to speak, over the last year has been the evolution of the uses of commercial enterprises. But the very nature of the Internet is open. And as a result, that means almost anyone armed with a computer and a modem can use it. And that means that as private sector folks place their assets on the Internet, so to speak, through the network, they also need to protect those assets. So security then becomes a very key issue in the private sector, especially as it applies to electronic commerce.
We have a fax from the Universidad Estatal a Distancia in San Jose, Costa Rica. The question is, I have heard something about electronic bulletin boards. How do they work?
Sure. Electronic bulletin boards are one facet of the Internet where users of similar interests can post articles or subjects and topics and meaningful information and exchange messaging and so on for items of interest. An example of that is that when I recruit software people into our organization, I post it on an electronic bulletin board known as SDNet Jobs. That's listed on a virtual news group and is accessible through using a personal computer, clicking on an icon for a software program known as WinVN or the Windows Virtual News Group program. So that's an example of how the virtual news can be used, and there's literally listservs and Usenet groups for almost any topic imaginable.
We have a call from the Universidad Nacional Autónoma de Mexico, the Faculty of Veterinary Medicine and Zootechnique in Mexico. Welcome. Your question, please.
Yes, we wanted to ask the following. How much time do you need to create an instructional page on the www? What's the cost, and how many people are required to create one of these very interesting examples that you've just talked to us about?
It takes very little time, and the way to do it is simply by using a word processor. More and more of today's word processors include the ability to save as HTML, to save it in the form of a World Wide Web page. If you add graphic arts and if you add more materials that your web page is linked to, that takes more development time. But the mechanics of creating it are really quite simple. It only gets more complicated when, in the form of a web quest, for example, you really need to think through creating a task that will engage your learners and will cause them to be doing higher order thinking as they go surfing on the web.
Is it a matter of weeks and months or minutes and hours?
The archetype web quest that I described took me the better part of a day to put together. And now that I've put one together, I would probably still spend a day, but they would be more elaborate and more interesting.
Okay. So it is not a huge task requiring armies of engineers. It's become a real, even that, a user-friendly experience.
Yes.
We have a fax from the Instituto Tecnológico de Tlaxiaco on the question of what software do we need to connect to the World Wide Web?
Yes, as I mentioned earlier, the main software that you need is known as a web browser. Companies such as Netscape and NetManage, and of course the Mosaic, which is on the internet now and can be downloaded. Most of this software is available for free. For example, you can get the Netscape Navigator by getting onto their home page and downloading the software right into your system. So basically the software cost is very minimal to access the web.
We have a call from Tula Tepeji, the Universidad Tecnológico de Tula Tepeji. Welcome. Your question, please.
How could we contact Dr. Shanks so as to be more informed regarding the setup for these web pages?
I believe in your materials on page 72 there is a list of worldwide websites, and if I recall correctly, the URL for Dr. Shanks' materials is in there. He's put together a very interesting set of web pages called Engines for Education. So that's an excellent introduction to what he's about, and you can get in touch with him directly because his email is there as well.
We have a call from Jalisco, the Instituto Tecnológico de Ciudad Guzmán. Welcome. Your question, please.
Sí, adelante.
Bueno.
Mire, estoy hablando del CBX49 de Ocotlán, Jalisco. Sí. ¿Cómo
Welcome.
hacer práctico y aplicable un programa como el Word?
How can we utilize World Wide Web so that it's practical for classes that have between 45 and 60 students and don't have a lot of computer equipment?
A very down-to-earth question.
Well, I think one way to do that is to not rely entirely on the World Wide Web as the source of materials. In the archetype example that I gave, some of the material I wanted students to look at was on the web, but there were pieces of paper, there were documents, there were other materials scattered around the room so that individuals could cycle through a smaller number of computer terminals in order to access the web.
And we have a question, a phone call from the Universidad Tecnológica de Panamá. Welcome. Your question, please.
¿Aló? Muy buenos días. Sí, ¿qué es mejor? Usarlo ya
What is
en
better,
inglés para World Wide Web,
to
o
use
invitar a San
something
Diego,
in English
en español,
for the World Wide Web or to do it in Spanish for the Spanish-speaking communities? What kind of learning is applicable?
A very good practical question about language usage.
I would say the material that's on the web right now is largely in English, and that's going to be a temporary phenomenon as more and more of the rest of the world gets on board. You'll be providing your own materials in your own language. But some of the better resources, some of the older ones now use English, and so the importance of English as a world language is underscored.
Jeff, what's your experience language-wise?
Well, I think that to get that in proper perspective, that the language of technology is primarily English. However, I think from the standpoint of using the internet, that knowledge of English is useful in that it expands your ability to access resources and possibly understand some of the technical terms that are presented in terms of how to access the internet or how to design applications that run on the internet. However, as Dr. Dodge says, I believe that each country will place their own languages and their own websites and their own learning experiences on the internet, and English will be sort of a language that is sort of in addition to and facilitates that process.
Okay. We have a fax from Panama, from Brazil, a question of what kind of learning is applicable to rural workers in developing countries like Brazil? Rural workers, how would you apply new learning technologies to that kind of condition?
Wow.
A challenge.
Well, I would have to say I would distinguish the things that apply themselves to constructivism as those that require higher level thinking and the ability to confront ambiguous or new situations. And having no knowledge at all of what a rural worker faces in Brazil, I don't know to what extent that is part of their world. It's easy to make the mistake of trying to do everything with constructivism, and it's not appropriate. When the content is stable, where there is a very discrete and already known ahead of time set of objectives, then traditional teaching works very well. But where you want to train people to think for themselves and to put more responsibility for learning on their shoulders rather than on the shoulders of a teacher, then constructivism with or without telecommunications is appropriate.
Jeff?
To add to that, I think the use of user-friendly graphics type technology and those types of sites where rural worker education would be involved, if I think the number one goal there initially would be to take the fear out of using a computer and present images that are friendly and easy to use so that they don't feel that they have to close a major education gap in technology to be able to get benefit from using internet-type technologies.
Mm-hmm. I would also add that as a North American, I am learning a great deal from Brazil on literacy campaigns or neighboring countries on the use of radio, for example, to reach rural workers. There are experiments going on in many parts of the world that we're all trying to learn from. We are only one set of resources here. We have a question from Panama, from the Universidad Tecnológica de Panama. Welcome. Your question, please.
Gracias.
Thank you. Once a web quest has been created, how could we create the anchor or the anchor word so that other internet users could access it as well?
Okay. Dr. Dodge?
All you need to do is post it on a server that is on the internet, and there are several indexes that are out there. One is called Lycos, another is called Yahoo, and once you tell those websites of the existence of your website, then everything that you put on your web will be indexed and made accessible to other people. So you will be surprised if you look on the log of your server to see that you'll be getting calls from all over the world. So it doesn't take much. In a matter of days, whatever you put up there will be known and shareable to the rest of the world.
We have a call now from Michoacán, from the Instituto Tecnológico Superior de Apatzingán. Welcome. Your question, please.
Good morning. Our question is the following. As users of email, we have access to international databases, but the question is, what advantages does the World Wide Web offer as regards its databases? Thank you.
Okay.
Yes, I think that one of the things to consider in the World Wide Web usage is use of such tools as the Wide Area Information Search Engine or Turbo Gopher type search engines, and these can be selected from various home pages, and you can use keyword searches to access the databases, and then to locate the databases through directory services. Once you've located the databases, then you're in a position to keyword search those databases for specific articles of interest or relevant to your request.
And we have a question, a live phone call from the Colegio de Bachilleros Estado de Sinaloa in Guasave, Sinaloa. Welcome, your question.
Thank you. We're calling from the Center for Educational Development from the Colegio de Bachilleres in Sinaloa, Mexico. And my question is English important in using the Internet protocol?
Thank you. A little more specific question on the language issue.
I think someone needs to speak English in order to read the documentation of what's out there on how to set up your own server. But once you have your server in place and begin to create your own materials, then English isn't necessary until you want to tap into the majority of the existing resources. But if you're intent on creating your own in-house materials, it's only useful to the person who sets it up.
Okay. Let us continue now with Module 2, in which Mr. Smith will explain access to and uses of that amazing global phenomenon today, the Internet.
Today, we'll be talking about my favorite topic, getting online with the world. The 1990s has seen a revolution in communications technology that will significantly affect our daily lives and how we conduct business and research. Most of us are familiar with fax machines, which have allowed us to send hard copy documents and messages to anyone, anywhere in the world with a fax machine. Now we are able to do these types of communications in electronic format without the requirement for a fax machine or hard copy device. In addition, you're not even required to know where the person is or his or her phone number. All that is required is an electronic address and some computer communications devices, and you are a participant in the global information superhighway. We'll be talking today about the backbone to this global information superhighway known as the Internet. That is evolving very rapidly into a global electronic communications media. The applications are virtually endless, as you may have gathered from Dr. Dodge's presentation. They are limited only by the ability to provide enough communications bandwidth, that is the currency of telecommunications, and end-user equipment to support these new applications. We'll be discussing such applications as electronic mail, desktop video conferencing, multimedia communications, and information search and retrieval tools. We'll also focus on some of the key elements that must be addressed to be able to use this superhighway effectively and implement it for yourself and your enterprise. I am sure many of you listening out there are familiar with or currently use some of the Internet capabilities. Hopefully, you cyberspace cruisers can bear with us a while we establish a common ground. I plan to start with a brief discussion on what the Internet is, how it is used, and methods of access. I also plan to discuss what some of the difficulties have been, as well as emerging applications that will make the Internet a more rich and friendly environment than it is today. At that point, I plan to move into some detailed discussion on some of the key considerations for implementing the Internet in your environment and making it useful for your personal and enterprise-wide use. At the end, I plan to summarize and hopefully answer any questions that you may have during the question and answer session. What is the Internet? The Internet is a virtual network that serves as a global information superhighway. By virtual network, I mean that users and or systems do not have to be directly connected to one another to exchange information. Unlike the phone system where one dials a specific direct number, the Internet only requires that you establish a connection with an established Internet server. Once accomplished, users can navigate around the world on the global information superhighway without having to redial. The Internet is very accessible. Any user armed with a computer, a modem, and an Internet account can have access. Before we get into how the Internet is used and how to implement an Internet capability for your organization, I'd like to make a few comments about the history of the Internet. In the 1960s, the Advanced Research Projects Agency of the U.S. Department of Defense developed a protocol that would support virtual network communications. This was at first to enhance the survivability of U.S. communications in the event of nuclear conflict. However, it quickly became clear in the 1970s that virtual networking would be useful for collaboration among various government agencies, government contractors, and university researchers. Usage was greatly expanded during the 1980s when the National Science Foundation developed a backbone network connecting 13 supercomputer service centers around the United States and established links to networks in other countries. Mid-level Internet carrier and cooperatives were established to provide regional services. The concept of a global network was truly being realized. In the 1990s, the usage has expanded rapidly from academia and government agencies to include commercial enterprises and home access. This expansion, coupled with the evolution of the user-friendly World Wide Web, has created a blossoming demand for online access. So how is the network used today? The most common application is the use of electronic mail to communicate with others through the use of computers. Electronic mail can be created, sent, and queued on a user server until that person logs in to read it. What a useful tool. At SAS, we use it far more than the fax machine. It is a great way to document communications as well as to broadcast a message to groups of all sizes. The persons that you are communicating with do not need to be there at the time you send the message. Thus, it is also a great antidote for phone tag and certainly facilitates international communications across many time zones. In a similar way, large files can be transferred by using either advanced email systems or through the use of file transfer programs. The network is used by researchers to browse for sources as well as to collaborate with colleagues. Various search tools, which will be discussed later, are available to facilitate complex searches through a wide variety of sources and databases worldwide. The network is also used by local governments and school districts to provide community information services. Electronic bulletin boards provide information on jobs, economic development, healthcare, government information, and more are available for access through a personal computer at the home or a nearby public library. In addition, there have been recent significant developments in interest in electronic marketing using the Internet. Enterprises can establish a presence on the network to advertise, disseminate information, and provide an electronic catalog for cyberspace sales. In addition, businesses with interest in specific industries can link together to conduct electronic data interchange and communicate with each other using email and other services. Certainly, another very important aspect is the opportunity to use the Internet as an educational and training tool, which Dr. Dodge has illustrated for you. What resources are available out there for end users? Thousands of universities and educational institutions around the world are online, providing millions of searchable sources and databases, as well as collaborative communications. Public and special libraries have accessible databases and catalogs on virtually any topic. Governmental agencies and information at all levels, local, state, or province, national, and international in scope, along with thousands of Internet servers containing searchable directories, databases, and public access catalogs. Millions of users communicating through email, Usenets, bulletin boards, and interactive communication. The Internet is growing daily. Thousands of users and sources come online every day. The Internet is a living entity. So why doesn't everybody use it or sing its praises? There are several problems which still currently exist that can make it difficult for the layman to use. Many of these problems can be related to the different levels of phone services and the conditions of phone lines and other means of physical communications in different countries. In some Latin American countries, a poor communications infrastructure will lead to frustrating results when using modems and other communication devices. Hopefully, installation of fiber optics and developments in global cellular communications will improve the situation. Growth in the World Wide Web will also help. To locate the web servers in your area, you would type in a Universal Record Locator, or URL, and search the menus or specific provinces and regional locales. For example, I have obtained a listing of accessible Internet sites in Mexico that can be made available through the International Training Center. The same can be done for all Latin American countries by accessing the World Wide Web servers URL that you see on your screen. I can explain more about this during the question and answer session. First is the technical support to guide users through the maze of getting connected and configuring their systems for effective use. In particular, this is true of Internet software. There are many different versions of software which perform various Internet functions that are not compatible with each other. In addition, much of the software is untested shareware that can fail intermittently without explanation. Transmission speed can also be a problem. The Internet performance that you can expect is directly related to the access speed provided by your enterprise. For users with 2400 baud modems, downloading files can be a lengthy undertaking, especially those users of websites. As more multimedia and graphics applications arrive on the network, higher speeds of access will be required to effectively participate. This topic will be revisited later on in the implementation discussion. One of the beauties of the Internet is that it's an uncensored, free expression of online participation. In many ways, use of the network mirrors the human experience. However, there is a lack of cohesive policy for management and development of the network. Other than some basic domain naming taxonomy, some unwritten rules of the road, and some basic transparent communication protocols, there are very few guidelines as to how to connect and present enterprises to the network. Issues relating to copyright, software piracy, pornographic materials, and electronic commerce are already making their way into the court system. Information relevancy is another major problem. Now that I'm out there, how do I find what I want? Users can be overwhelmed by information overload. Many a frustrating hour can be spent getting lost in cyberspace without productive results. Of course, there are some Internet navigation dictionaries, but they are cumbersome and out of date as soon as they are printed. Last, but certainly not least, are the issues of security. Many Internet users who are not running active viral scan programs have had the joy of downloading a virus and trashing their machine. Countless stories appear in the papers regarding hackers who invade the privacy of Internet resources and end users. Professional electronic criminals and spies are out there trying to steal credit cards and conduct industrial espionage. Users need to be vigilant in protecting their enterprises with firewalls and authentication procedures. Help is on the way. Along with Internet training courses and improving literature are a number of tools to assist users in dealing with the vastness of the Internet. The most important development has been the evolution of the World Wide Web using a special language called Hypertext Markup Language. HTML provides point-and-click graphical access to specific users' resources. Users armed with 14 4-kilobit modems or better can effectively utilize this new capability. The sites that implement this capability are known as home pages, and the software programs that locate them are known as web browsers, as Dr. Dodge mentioned. Many packages, such as Enhanced Mosaic and Netscape, are but a few that effectively navigate the Internet in this new format. Search tools have been under development for several years. These tools allow end users to enter keywords in locating specific information resources relevant to their research and to search specific databases for specific articles of interest. Many of these tools are integrated in a campus-wide information system that provides a suite of search capabilities for university researchers and students. Some of these tools include gophers that allow users to search directories around the world by keywords, and wide area information search that allows keyword searches of specific databases and sources. Use of these tools and the web are facilitated by end users operating in a Windows or Macintosh environment on their desktop platform. Another important tool that allows end users to log on to systems around the world as network guests is called HiTelNet. HiTelNet is accessible from standard text interface as well as the web. Users can locate important sources of information using the HiTelNet and establish connections to important information directly from the desired entity. In some cases, richer access may require an account number. Another important benefit of HiTelNet is that users do not have to remember cumbersome domain names to achieve access. They can tree search their way down to the desired source and simply click on it for access. Useful internet shareware is being developed and can be downloaded directly into the end user machine to provide specific application capability. Electronic mail, e.g. Qualcomm's PC Eudora, file transfer protocol, FTP, applications, Usenet News, known as the WinVN program, reader software, interactive communications, internet relay chat are but a few of the useful programs that facilitate access for end users. Along with the continuing evolution in internet software helping end users attain productive access, there are some intriguing emerging applications that will broaden the horizons and contribute to the robustness of the global information superhighway. Multimedia applications, that is voice, video, and data, with 3D graphics are being developed to provide the capability to download photographs, sound, movies, and so on. For example, if someone was interested in Dr. Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech, they could actually download and play back the actual experience of the speech. Desktop video using the internet to provide audio and video communication between desktops around the world will greatly enhance opportunities for long-distance learning and collaboration. Of course, use of this technology requires enhancing the desktop computers with mini camera, sound cards, and higher bandwidth transmission capability. This multimedia explosion should accelerate the movement started by the World Wide Web to provide electronic marketing, advertising and selling, as well as support the transactions in a true electronic commerce environment. Users will be able to browse catalogs and products of interest in the form of electronic shopping malls. With the advent of more powerful home computer systems, users can bring these services into the home through powerful new telephone and cable delivery systems currently being developed. These systems will give the end user the bandwidth necessary to participate in this enriched environment. So, how does anyone get access to the network? The most common method of access for individual users is accomplished by dialing a local internet service provider or a long-distance provider offering an 800 type service. The minimum equipment needed can be an older PC or Macintosh and a 2400 BPS modem. These configurations usually access the network at 2400 BPS and operate in a text mode. The most useful applications are email and text-oriented Gopher servers. Most PCs sold today are more powerful, have more memory, and come equipped with at least a 14.4 kilobit modem. At this speed, web access is achievable even though large graphic files can be painfully slow to download. For those of you in universities and large enterprises, access is achieved through a local area network gateway. The gateway is part of the campus-wide network and provides opportunity for access at much higher speeds. The Internet server on campus serves as a node for managing access to the Internet through a large trunk line, usually T1 at 1.544 million bits per second, that connects to the Internet carrier. The users simply point and click and they achieve high-speed access. A relatively new service, known as the Integrated Services Digital Network, is now available to provide higher speed access for both LAN and individual users. PCs armed with ISDN cards, e.g. WaveRunner boards, can access the network at 64 kilobits, which is excellent for utilizing the graphics and multimedia features of the World Wide Web. LAN users can achieve ISDN access by configuring the trunk line for ISDN access through customer premise equipment, e.g. data service units, routers, network interfaces, etc. I have diagrams of how these connections can be achieved as an appendix to the presentation charts, and will be glad to discuss these in detail during the question and answer sessions. I must admit, however, that I am far more familiar with how this is achieved in the U.S. and Canada. One more note, ISDN must be supported for transport by the Internet carrier provider that you are connected to. There are other technologies emerging for high-speed access. One is frame relay, which optimizes connections for LANs on trunk lines up to T1. Another is asynchronous transfer mode that supports backbone connections at T3, 45 million bits per second, and higher. This increase in speed will be needed to support the growing number of multimedia applications and Internet users. So far, we have touched upon what the Internet is, what's out there, and how it is used. Now I'd like to focus on the key steps that need to be taken for an enterprise to achieve Internet access and presentations for its constituents. These steps include items as listed on the chart and are discussed in detail on the following charts. Implementation of an Internet service is a process that is similar to the implementation of major information systems that you may have already participated in at your facility. The steps are site surveys, requirements analysis, cost trade-offs, technology assessment and selection, network design and configuration, integration with existing systems, initial deployment, and ongoing support. Site surveys help establish the baseline for implementation. The site survey provides valuable information on existing LAN communications and computer equipment to see if any upgrades will be needed to establish the service. The survey should evaluate the current software environment, including operating system, communications, Windows or Mac interfaces, current Internet programs, and client preferences for desired software to be installed. The site survey assesses the cable plan